My darling philosophers, welcome to our daily devotional reading. Let's begin immediately by turning inward, looking within. Maybe best done, especially if you're a beginner, by simply paying attention to your breath. Preferably the breath that you feel move in your tummy, in and out. Comes very naturally, and I do it myself, to control your breathing once you do this. But it's not necessary to control your breathing. Just breathe and pay attention to it. And you would hear me already sighing, because when we turn inward, we let go of the external. There's a sense of relief, release. No expectations, just the stillness. Being in the stillness, just being. It almost feels as if the closest state to being in the truth, to the real, to the all, to the one, is this state which we so seldom experience nowadays, that simple being, not doing anything, not thinking anything, not wanting, dreaming, planning, not feeling as if we need to earn anything, but the state of unconditional existence, just being. One day we will have to just sit in this being for 2 hours and just revel in the simplicity of being human, of being. But for now, we are here with a purpose, and that is to read Plato. So let's proceed. We are reading through Plato, all his undisputed, indisputed, I'm not sure which, works in 1 year. And we are with day 179. Ooh, almost 180. Not quite. Polus. What do you mean? If a man is detected in an unjust attempt to make himself a tyrant, and when detected is racked, mutilated, has his eyes burned out, and after having had all sorts of great injuries afflicted on him, and having seen his wife and children suffer the like, is at least impaled or tarred and burned alive, will he be happier than if he escaped and become a tyrant, and continue all through life doing what he likes and holding the reins of government, the envy and admiration both of citizens and strangers? Is that the paradox which, as you say, cannot be refuted. For a moment there I thought I forgot my pencil. What a horrible world that would be. Socrates, there again, noble Polus, you are raising hobgoblins instead of refuting me. Just now you were calling witnesses against me, but please to refresh my memory a little. Did you say in an unjust attempt to make himself a tyrant? Polus, yes, I did. Socrates, then I say that neither of them will be happier than the other. Neither he who unjustly acquires a tyranny, nor he who suffers in the attempt. For of two miserables one cannot be the happier, but that he who escapes and becomes a tyrant is the more miserable of the two. Why do you laugh, Polus? Well, this is a new kind of refutation, when anyone says anything, instead of refuting him, to laugh at him. Polus, but do you not think, Socrates, that you have been sufficiently refuted when you say that which no human being will allow? Ask the company. Socrates, O Polus, I am not a public man, and only last year, when my tribe were serving as Prytanes councils, I imagine, and it became my duty as their president to take the votes, there was a laugh at me because I was unable to take them. And as I failed then, you must not ask me to count the suffrages of the company now. But if, as I was saying, you have no better argument than numbers, let me have a turn, and do you make trial of the sort of proof which, as I think, is required. For I shall produce one witness only of the truth of my words, and he is the person with whom I am arguing. His suffrage I know how to take, but with the many I have nothing to do, and do not even address myself to them. May I ask then whether you will answer in turn and have your words put to the proof? For I certainly think that I and you and every man do really believe that to do a greater evil than to suffer injustice, then that to do is a greater evil than to suffer injustice, and not to be punished than to be punished. Polus, and I should say neither, nor any man. Would you yourself, for example, suffer rather than do injustice? Socrates, yes, and you too. I or any man would. Polus, quite the reverse, neither you nor I nor any man. Socrates, but will you answer? Polus, to be sure I will, for I am curious to hear what you can have to say. Socrates, tell me then, and you will know. And let us suppose that I am beginning at the beginning. Which of the two, Polus, in your opinion, is the worst? To do injustice or to suffer? Polus, I should say that suffering was worst. Socrates. And which is the greater disgrace? Which is the greater disgrace? Answer, or more shameful in the other translation. To do. Socrates. And the greater disgrace is the greater evil. Polus. Certainly not. Socrates. I understand you to say, if I am not mistaken, that the honorable is not the same as the good, or the disgraceful as the evil. Polus. Certainly not. Socrates. Let me ask a question of you. When you speak of beautiful things such as bodies, colors, figures, sounds, institutions, do you not call them beautiful in reference to some standard? Bodies, for example, are beautiful in proportion as they are useful, or as the sight of them gives pleasure to the spectators. Can you give any other account of personal beauty? Polus. I cannot. Socrates. And you would say of figures or colors generally that they were beautiful, either by reason of the pleasure which they give, or of their use, or of both? Polus. Yes, I should. Socrates. And you would call sounds and music beautiful for the same reason? I should. Laws and institutions also have no beauty in them, except insofar as they are useful or pleasant, or both? I think not. And may not the same be said of the beauty of knowledge? To be sure, Socrates. And I very much approve of your measuring beauty by the standard of pleasure and utility. Socrates. And deformity or disgrace may be equally measured by the opposite standards of pain and evil. Certainly. Socrates. Then when of two beautiful things one exceeds in beauty, the measure of the excess is to be taken in one or both of these. That is to say, in pleasure or utility or both. Very true. And of two deformed things, that which exceeds in deformity or disgrace exceeds either in pain or evil. Must it not be so? Yes. But then again, what was the observation which you just now made about doing and suffering wrong? Did you not say that suffering wrong was more evil and doing wrong more disgraceful? I did. Then if doing wrong is more disgraceful than suffering, the more disgraceful must be more painful, and must exceed in pain or in evil or both. Does not that also follow? Of course. First then, let us consider whether the doing of injustice exceeds the suffering in the consequent pain. Do the injurers suffer more than the injured? No, Socrates, certainly not. Then they do not exceed in pain? No. But if not in pain, then not in both? Certainly not. Then they can only exceed in the other? Yes. That is to say, in evil? True. Then doing injustice will have an excess of evil, and will therefore be a greater evil than suffering injustice? Clearly. But have not you and the world already agreed that to do injustice is more disgraceful than to suffer? Yes. And that is now discovered to be more evil? True. And would you prefer a greater evil or a greater dishonor to a less one? Answer, Polus, and fear not. For you will come to no harm if you nobly resign yourself into the healing hand of the argument, as to a physician without shrinking, and either say yes or no to me. Socrates. Would any other man prefer a greater to a less evil? Polus. No, not according to this way of putting the case, Socrates. Socrates. Then I say truly, Polus, that neither you nor I nor any man would rather do than suffer injustice. For to do injustice is the greater evil of the two. That is the conclusion. I don't quite see why he had to take this roundabout way and to getting to that conclusion. But maybe it's self-evident to us because it has been taken a roundabout way in the past. Socrates. You see, Polus, when you compare the two kinds of refutation, how unlike they are. All men, with the exception of myself, are of your way of thinking, but your single assent and witness are enough for me. I have no need of any other. I take your suffrage and am regardless of the rest. Enough of this, and now let us proceed to the next question, which is whether the greatest of evils to a guilty man is to suffer punishment, as you suppose, or whether to escape punishment is not a greater evil, as I suppose. Consider. You would say that to suffer punishment is another name for being justly corrected when you do wrong. I should. And would you not allow that all just things are honorable insofar as they are just? Please to reflect and tell me your opinion. Polus. Yes, Socrates, I think that they are. Socrates. Consider again. Where there is an agent, a doer, or an actor, must there not also be a patient, one who is acted upon, or who suffers the act? But patient is appropriate because he will be dealing with medical terms. But it's more an agent and one who is acted upon. Polus. I should say so. Socrates. And will not the patient, the one who is acted upon, suffer that which the agent does? And will not the suffering have the quality of the action? I mean, for example, that if a man strikes, there must be something which is stricken. Yes. And if the striker strikes violently or quickly, that which is struck will be struck violently or quickly. True. And the suffering to him who is stricken is of the same nature as to the act of him who strikes. Yes. Socrates. And if a man burns, action. The other translation has specifically surgical burning. There is something which is burned, certainly. Socrates. And if he burns in excess or so as to cause pain, the thing burned will be burned in the same way. Truly. And if he cuts, the same argument holds. Again, surgical cutting, the other one says. There will be something cut. Yes. And if the cutting be great or deep or such as will cause pain, the cut will be in the same nature. That is evident. Then you would agree generally to the universal proposition that I was just now asserting, that the affection of the patient answers to the affection of the agent. I agree. Then, as this is admitted, let me ask whether being punished is suffering or acting. It's suffering, Socrates. There can be no doubt of that. So being acted upon, being punished is to be acted upon. That's what the suffering here means, not to like, oh, but being acted upon. Socrates. And suffering implies, sorry, and suffering implies an agent. Polus. Certainly, Socrates, and he is the punisher. Socrates. And he who punishes rightly punishes justly. Yes. And therefore he acts justly. Justly. Then he who is punished and suffers retribution suffers justly. That is evident. And that which is just has been admitted to be honorable. Certainly. Then the punisher does what is honorable, and the punished suffer what is honorable. True. Thus far our reading. My first thought when we was talking of the rack and all the different ways of torture was how this might be in one of the bad ways that Platonism slipped into Christianity. That torture or punishment is justified in that it is just. And it has a just effect on the sufferer, the one who is punished. I've said this before, I agree with Robert Sapolsky that punishment is stupid. Corrective action being acted upon for the sake of correction, if at all possible, which I think that is the only way it is possible if it comes from an outside agent. That is the way to go. Which links then to the last thing, I think. No, not the last thing. One of the things I wrote. The healing hand of the argument was the quote. I think it's beautiful. The healing hand of the argument. And I felt quite a sense of calm and peace when I read that. And I wrote that to be the joy of standing corrected. I think there is something in us that hungers for truth, whatever truth may be. And for the real to know. And being corrected in your misunderstandings is therefore something quite healing, the healing hand of the argument. If we develop the ears to hear and the hearts open enough to be changed, that is. It is of course difficult because as I was writing that I was also thinking of other people do not necessarily know either. And so it's very difficult to discern when that gut feeling of yours and like, oh, but I know this to be true, when it is contested by others, when to let it go, and when to stand up for it. I think in one of the dialogues, I thought it was here, that Socrates implies that not only that the only man who cares to persuade is the one he has in dialogue with, but himself, the one he sees in the mirror in the morning. And knowing you're good with that person. But that is, of course, much more dangerous. But this morning I opened randomly at a symbol and the symbol I opened at was the way, the path of the road. And it ends with going into the unknown, where there is no path, is the task of the hero, the genius, the prophet, that may result in the discovery of the new path for stumbling humankind. It's not a safe way to go at all. And I know the hero's journey has become quite popular, in that everyone wants to be the hero, and in many ways everyone should want to be the hero and be the hero. But there are dangers along the way. And there's no hero's journey without helpers. Don't forget that. It is not by any stretch of the imagination an individual undertaking. Sometimes we walk alone, but we never walk, and we're never supposed to walk unsupported. And unadvised. And unequipped with gifts from the others on the road. Oh, I just wrote a sentence here that let us suppose that I am beginning at the beginning. I feel like that would be such a beautiful opening for a novel. I wonder if I'm allowed to do that. To what extent is that plagiarism? And to what extent is that intertextuality? I am going to start a novel with that. How to act wisely. Keep in mind that how you act will be how the action is received. We all have an impact on everyone around us, more so sometimes than we can imagine. And hence we are all called to act in such a way that we would want to receive whatever the action is in such a way. And I'm not quite sure what I'm saying. So I read 2 books today, as promised, book 6, and then also a chapter from Gnosis, which in both of the books I have way too much marked for. All the blue things are for just the chapter of the day for discussion. This one is maybe a little bit more difficult because it's translation. Oh, this one just says the Gnostic authors saw the return of Christ, the coming back of Christ, the second coming of Christ, as initially meant as a myth to indicate the time when we would be united with the godly consciousness, goddelijke bewustzijn. The one. There's so many things. I'm absolutely loving this book. I didn't say much, I think, or if anything, about the the chapter on Christian gnosis or early Christian gnosis, I didn't find anything exceptionally revealing. I think there's nothing you don't know in this book. The Plotinus, he starts with Plotinus, and then that whole, I think, if you remember, it would be on this, the tattoo that I would want to get if I am initiated as a Platonic priestess, which was not my initiation, is a 10-point triangle. The one, the nous, or mind, which is 2, the soul, 3, then 4, matter. But matter, I thought you would find this interesting. Strictly speaking, matter does not exist. It exists only insofar as a mirror image, in the same way that a mirror image exists. We see it, and we can speak over it, but it doesn't have any independent, substantial existence. I thought you would find that interesting. We saying that's the Dutch. Wij zijn. We are most ourselves when we lose our self-consciousness. Transformation for Plotinus is the inversion, the turn from outside to inside, reorientation. And the idea is that we model ourselves after mind. And then he speaks of Porphyry and Iamblichus. I've got books on theurgy on my read shelf. Personally, I didn't find it very helpful. Like, I would rather, and I found someone who teaches theurgic practices, but I kind of like figuring it out myself. Theurgy is theurgia, God work, opposed to theologos, God's speech. And it's transformative rituals. It says here where the gods do the work. But I think you can also say it as doing God's work. And Iamblichus apparently is not a dualist. He doesn't think this world is bad, which is nice. That's a very nice, seldom seen. In fact, I wrote here the wheel because there's a order in the cosmos. Like initially, this book calls it the Apollinis, Apolloic, like from Apollo. I don't know how to say that. Way of being, this order and this cosmic order, and Indeed, it's very Platonic. And this one is nice. Well, every human being has the divine spark. It is not the aim or the task of us to escape the cosmos, but to use this spark in your own godly work or theurgy, to participate in the continuous co-creation of the cosmos. And then I wrote, if I have to create a God so that his prayers might be answered, so be it. I think that's the only thing. There was a lot of things also marked in, but I think I spoke of all these things already that I marked in. In Dostoevsky. Talking of the road, since the road was the pull of this morning, for I had begun my progress at home, and once I had embarked upon that road, all that followed later was not only without difficulty, but even joyous and merry. Maybe that connects to the whole clean your room first. Work on yourself first. Begin your process at home, your progress at home. Mold yourself to the nous. I think probably they say the nous because the one is... Well, maybe also because we cannot mold ourselves to the one as individuals. You, on the other hand, must work for the sake of the whole. You must act for the sake of the future. Never seek any reward, for you already have a great reward upon this earth, your spiritual joy, which only the righteous man acquires. And on that point, which quite connects well with Socrates saying the just man is the happy man, I think that is all we need to say today. Sophia herself will guide your way.